What's up? What's up? It's time for Done Way Past Funny with your host, G.D. Fenderson. Join us as we discuss the arts, science, and business of comedy with comedians and comedian adjacent. With this episode's guest, Big Rich Brock. It's time to get down and get dope with Done Way Past Funny. Hi, welcome to Done Way Past Funny, where we discuss the arts, science, and business of comedy with comedians and comedian adjacent. I'm your host, G.D. Fenderson, certified forensic humorist at large, but I'm losing weight. My guest this episode is pastor turned comedian, Big Rich Brock. How's it going?
GD, doing great, brother. How about you today?
I'm doing great. Just so I apologize about that little bit of snafu in the beginning. Snafu is a technical term. I think it's a medical term. But if you don't mind, Rich, letting people know a little bit about yourself,
Sure.
how long you've been doing comedy, where you are, and how they can stalk you or book you if they're so inclined.
That'll work. Well, today I am calling from Northwest Georgia at a beautiful parking lot at the Starbucks in Ackworth. The joys of running all over town, doing some meetings, and thank God it's a beautiful day. So I'm just sitting here getting to spend time with you and our listeners today. I'm born and raised in Georgia. I'm about an hour from Chattanooga, Tennessee, and about 45 minutes from Atlanta. And Big Rich Brock Comedy has been going on 3 years since March. So I've got 3 years and a couple of months almost. Was a pastor for 25 plus years, preached 4,000 sermons, TV, radio, prisons, you name it. Did a little bit of everything in that, and decided during COVID that I wanted to try an open mic. Went, did 3, said this is what I want to attempt. Booked my first show, just put it together myself. 47 people showed up, $10 a pop, and I've been going full steam ahead ever since, GD.
Now this I didn't know about. I did not know about the. I didn't think to know. How would I know? I'm actually just getting to know you
Yeah,
just like everybody else. But you did sermons in prison. Have you done comedy in prison yet?
I have not. I have not. Now, a lot of my sermons, I'd use comedy,
Right.
wherever I was at, because I've always done comedy. I just hadn't been a comedian except the last 3 years and went full time about a year and a half ago. I laugh because preaching in prison, I preached on death row at Brushy Mountain Prison, where Lee Harvey Oswald, he wasn't there when I'm way too young for him.
She
But
was going to start it really young.
yeah, I started in the womb. But that's the prison he was at. And I joke around, preaching on death row was easier than leading booster club events for my son's football team. I'm telling you, the people, it's just a whole different beast. I have spoke for a living since I'm 21. So wherever it is, I end up doing the talking, it seems like. But prison ministry was interesting. I did that for about 4 years. Then I started having a family, taking more time with my kids, and I handed that off to somebody else.
Now I can see why doing prison would be easier than doing the sporting event, so to speak, because the parents of little league children are the worst parents on the planet. I don't care how, okay, I understand they're there for the
Yeah.
kids, but they're not there for the kids. They are living vicariously through their kids. And so when well, you weren't coaching, but still, when the coach talks to the kid, the coach is actually talking to the parent. Or at least that's what the parent hears.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
I can see why it's rough.
And,
Now,
a booster club president in a whatever sport, primary job is to raise money
yeah.
and to get volunteers and that kind of stuff. And talking about Little League Baseball, Deep South, Bible Buckle area, sports are big, all sports, but especially football, baseball, softball for girls, basketball, wrestling, then probably soccer. So I was involved in football, baseball, basketball. Well, GD, I had a year for our community. I was president of the recreation department. I told them I'd do it a year and then let's hand it to somebody else because you'd get guys in there that would do it for 10 years.
Right.
And, it needs to be, it's like a church. It needed a good BM every once in a while, needed to be
Right.
cleaned out, get some things going. So I did it for a year. And that was the longest year of my life. Was
Really?
yes,
I
it
thought,
was.
aren't you divorced?
Yes, but I'm telling you, that's what led to it.
Oh.
I said, yeah,
Okay.
marriage was great till I did that. No, I'm teasing. It is a lot, and I give kudos to people that volunteer for stuff for the right reasons.
Right.
My dad used to say, growing up in a small town, he would get asked to run for city council, things like that. He said most of the time it's somebody that didn't get their way last year that's trying to get on the council to get their way. He goes, most of the
Oh,
time. He goes,
yeah,
I ain't
yeah.
got time to hear the same five people go on for an hour. No, thank you. So, yeah.
Now, which is easier to write, a good sermon or a good comedy set?
Both of them for me, I look at my own life.
Right.
So, sermons, of course, you got Bible references and you pull scriptures out and you teach the word of God. My comedy, I do a bit where when I first started doing comedy, I said there's really not a big difference for me. Because most of my sermons were more comedy bits, and that's
Right.
probably why I'm a comedian now and
Right.
not asked to preach a lot because I'm more comedic than inspirational at times. But I think it's probably what I didn't understand when I started comedy that you could do the same 10 minutes for a year because sermons, you better have a new one every week
Yes.
or you're
Yes.
going to get called out. And I was
Yes.
writing material for comedy just like a bull in a china shop. Man, I was spouting out new stuff. And somebody said, you don't have to do something new, perfect what you've written. And
Right.
I'm like, oh man, in church world, they might not listen to everything you say, but they're going to know if you're preaching the same message
Yeah.
week to week to week. So that's probably the biggest difference is comedy, like now I've got a show this week that's an hour set I'm doing for a First Friday concert series outside of Atlanta. And that hour that I'll do, there's maybe 10 minutes that's new. Things
Right.
that I've been tweaking on the last month. Most of it are things that I know, okay, that's going to work. That's going to work. So that's what I love about comedy versus the ministry side is you get to, and then the light bulb will come on. You'll be doing a bit and then something new will jump out of your brain or out of
Yeah.
your heart, wherever you keep it. And you're
Yeah.
like, oh my God, that was great. That worked. And
That's
thank
how
God it's on my phone so I can listen to it later.
that's how I get in trouble because I I, I did a 90-minute set. I did my first one. I'm going to call them specials only because there's not a technical.
Yeah.
It's on YouTube as a 90-minute show, and I rehearsed it. I'd done it a few places before I recorded it, and it was like 86 to 90 minutes every
Yeah.
single night. Well, the night I recorded it, the guy who was my timekeeper 10 minutes into it, he has a family emergency. And because the thing was going and cameras are rolling, he just ups and leaves. And I see him leave, and I'm like, but then things I'm doing, but the show is going on. So I'm thinking to myself, fine, I know this material. I know when 90 minutes is,
Yeah.
I'm good. I start interacting with the audience. Long story short, like my set, it wound up being instead of 90 minutes, it wound up being 40 minutes long. So it's like 2 hours and 10 minutes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. That's and because
That's
and
a
things just
movie.
kept yeah, yes. And I didn't feel bad because the reason why I did the 90-minute sets, well, The actual reason I do 90 minutes is because my idol, my comedy idol, so to speak, is a guy named Christopher Titus, and it seems like I think he did like 1 90-minute set a year, basically. And I never thought I would do that, but I thought I could do one every 2 years, and
Yeah.
I did, I could, with the exception of COVID, through a year in there that I wasn't planning on. So it was like it was 2 year, 3 year, 2 year, something like that.
Yeah.
Um, but I went long, and because of let's put it this way, because of Marvel movies, I think
Yeah.
people can sit for 2 and 3 hours, and I don't feel guilty anymore.
Yeah.
As
Hey,
long as you keep them interested, as
if
long as you
they're
can keep them engaged.
engaged and they're laughing,
Yes.
yeah, I've done, and I got tickled. I had a comedian who's been doing this 40 years. Somebody was at a bar show I did when I first started in my hometown, and I did like an hour and 20 minutes. He filmed 2 minutes, sent it to this comic, says, "You got to see this guy. He's kept these people engaged for an hour and 20 minutes." And she's like, "That's BS. There's no way." And he says, "Well, he used to be a preacher." Well, that's still BS. And I met her, got some great advice from her. She came to a show that I filmed, like you were saying. And basically, when the cameras came on, I told my film guy, I said, "I'm going to go as long as I can and as long as they're laughing, and then we'll have film." Um, that woman, that comic was sitting on the front row, right center stage, GD. And I thought, if I've got it, she's going to tell me. And if I don't, I'll know it before I come off the stage. And she gave me great advice. She gave me great kudos. And basically, for me, I'm a clean comic. I don't really advertise I'm clean unless they ask. I
Right.
just want to do comedy and be
Right.
funny. And you might figure out, 10 minutes in, man, he ain't said a cuss word in 10 minutes. Or you might not notice it at all. And I think I guess part of it being out of the church world, I didn't want to be a church comic, nothing wrong
Right.
with them. And there's good opportunities there. But I said that had been my life. And it's kind of like in the church world, I'm I'm not clean enough, though I am. And in the club world, I'm not dirty enough.
Oh
So
yeah. Right. I
you know, I
understand.
I found my place and where I fit, and I'm just riding it out. So and having a good time while I'm doing it.
Now I'm not a dirty comic, but it's not that it's a problem. It's the way my mother raised. Okay, okay. My mother never taught me this. This is what I deduced from all the lectures. My mother, what I deduced is that there are no such thing as good words or bad words, just bad intentions.
Okay,
So
yeah,
and of course my mother said that, but it took her like 12 years and 1,300 lectures, and she could have just gotten it down to that one
you got it
sentence.
down to one sentence.
Right.
Yeah,
As a matter of fact, most of the time in my comedy, if I say my mother taught me, she never actually said those words. Is what I deduced from the years of
yeah,
lectures and
yeah,
beatings and stuff. So, but that's one of the things. There's no such thing as bad words, just bad intentions.
yeah,
And so, I'm not a dirty comic, but I have a lot of innuendos.
yeah, yeah. Me too.
And I had one person say to me, you're pretty funny, but you're not dirty enough. And then I had another person say to me, all you do are dick jokes. And I'm like, I haven't done one dick joke. The only thing I have, the closest thing I have to a dick joke is this. I will apologize and say, especially if I'm following if a bunch of young comics go up in front of me, where most of the time it's like masturbate and dick and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
I will say, I apologize. I do not have any dick jokes. I have a penis tutorial. No, no. I said I have a penis commentary, and it leans to the left, and that's it. So, and that's the
that's a pretty
only.
good one.
Thank you. That's the only penis joke I have. That's the only dick joke I have. But I had
Yeah,
a guy who's, you know, really, really big in comedy. He's managed a lot of really big names, and he accused me of having nothing but dick jokes. And I thought to myself, you were reading into material. I said, that you were reading a single entendre and it was actually a double and triple entendre. You lost my entendres.
Yeah, you just got your mind on dick. That's all.
That's
Yeah.
it. Yeah. What's up with you? What's your problem?
Well,
Now,
when I started and did the open mic things, there's 25 of us, maybe two don't cuss at all. And I don't, if it's funny, cuss, don't cuss. If it's funny, I'm in. The thing I notice a lot, especially you mentioned when people start out, is if they don't have anything to say, they just
right.
cuss
Yes.
and get that awkward laugh, and they think that that's them being funny. And I'm like, well, that's not comedy. That's just awkwardness,
Yes.
or you not have anything to say. If you got a cuss word and it's part of what you do, go for it.
It,
My shows, I know my brand. So I might say two cuss words in an hour,
right.
but it's not the F bomb. It's not, GD. It's not, it's things that I tie into what I'm doing. And normally it's out of me telling a story of when I was a kid or something like that.
Yeah.
But that's just me. I mean, some of my favorites. I mean, you don't grow up listening to Red Fox and be offended, being
Yeah.
offended.
Yeah. Now, so I'm gonna go there then because you now was Red Fox okay? Because I don't think the Red Fox was your dad's collection, so I'm assuming those were the records you got through your Columbia House
Oh
thing.
yes, yes.
Okay.
Thank God. Hey, listen, and I do a bit about it. I went into financial hardship as a 10-year-old boy when I joined the Columbia House Record Club. And I figured out that my mother let me do that. So then I went to my grandmother's on each side, and I got 36 albums instead of the 12 for a penny. I
Right.
got three commitments, but then I had to buy,
Oh, there. Yeah.
four at $30 a pop times three, and my dad hit the roof. But yes, I got my father loved Sanford and Son, but he
Okay. Yeah.
wasn't a Red Fox comedian fan. But
Right.
yeah, that's where I got that album. That's where I got Richard Pryor. A little bit older, it was walking around the neighborhood in an all white town blasting Eddie Murphy and all of us enjoying Eddie Murphy. I was more, those were the people that I enjoyed. Rodney Dangerfield, I listen to now. I mean, I made a list. When you talk about comics that inspire you,
Right.
that list goes from those names to my uncle Bo, who was hilarious, but never picked up a mic, but was a master storyteller.
Yes.
And I think that in my community, there were people that I remember my dad, we had a comic come to town, and he said, man, that guy was funny, but Joe Don Doran was even funnier. And that was the dude that did 5 minutes, who was the president of the Lions Club. And, so I think you find inspiration, you can find it anywhere. And I joke around. I've had a few people because I started this in my 50s, as I believe you did
Yeah.
when we
55.
were chatting, and
Yeah.
I people asked me, why'd you start so late, and I said, well, I had to get both my parents in heaven because they would have been floored. I joke, if my parents were alive, my dad would be at the show and say, dear God, somebody paid $25 to come to this. And my mother would be saying, oh, that's not true, that's not true, that didn't really happen. uh because they would have been, but they would have been proud, supportive. But I waited until I was just in a place in life where I truly just wanted to try it, because
Right.
I knew when COVID hit, I thought, what's something I'd regret never doing? And an open mic was on the top of my list. And once I did it, I was like, oh man, this is, even if I do nothing else but host an open mic in my town once a
Right.
month at a bar, great. But within 3 months, I started booking shows, and that was 330 headlining shows ago in the last 3 years. So I've
Wow.
just been marching forward.
Now, but you mentioned your mother and your father. Which one of the were? Which one of the two were funnier?
Oh, my dad, by far. Now, I didn't think so. But like when I do shows now, GD, my old buddies from the 1900s,
Yeah.
they come to my shows and they're like, "Man, your dad was hilarious," and I'm like, "No, man, he wasn't." They says, "Oh yeah, he was. You just hated it because it was all about you, you know, or stuff that I'd get punished for." Like one time I got busted. I would say I was going to the movies. For people in our age bracket, you didn't have, phones, you didn't have ways to track people. So
Right.
I would say I was going to the movies. That gave me 3 hours.
Right.
And then I would sneak into a bar in Chattanooga when I was 17, when the age was 21, to go dancing and drinking and maybe meet a woman, not a girl. That was
Yeah.
what I was desiring. Well, I got caught one night. And I'd been saying I was going to the movies for a year. And my dad was so pissed. And he said, "You've watched more movies than Siskel and Ebert." And when he said that, man, I just was like, "That's funny right there." But I knew better to laugh. I saved that for 40 years, and now tell it because he was so pissed, and that's all he could come up with because he was like, but I thought, hey, that's a classic line. Was you've seen more, and you'll have to Google that if you're under 30 to know who Siskel and Ebert is, but that's okay.
Now it's funny because I can't remember if I used this in the clip. I know you talk about it in your dry bar, and I think all of us. Matter of fact, you did like a call and response. No, that was different. But you got, just like me. You got beatings that you didn't
Oh, yeah.
deserve,
Yes.
and my mother used to say, "I know there's something you did that I didn't catch you, that you think you got away with. Well, this is for that."
Yes. Yes.
And yeah.
I joke around in my shows. I talk a lot about being an only child because I am one. I have three sons, and I tease people. I'm like, listen, if you're the parent of an only child here tonight, after the show, procreate, have some babies, and not because that child needs a playmate. He needs an alibi. He needs somebody to take the blame because when you're the only one, you take every whipping the house has to give. And I did take several whippings from my father for things that my father actually did that he didn't want my mama to find out about. And he would use what your mother would say. He said, "Well, you probably did something we didn't catch, so we'll call it even." And he was right. So, yeah, whole different world then, man.
Now,
I tease now. You can't get away with a lot of that now, but
were you ever
yeah.
able to talk your father out of giving you a beating?
Uh, no, no. And it wasn't, when I tease, I remember one night I did this bit and I'm in Midtown Atlanta, and a woman came up to me after the show and said, "Did you report your father?" And I'm like, "Lady, I grew up on Hog Jow Road in Chickamauga, Georgia. If I'd have told the police, they'd have whipped me too. I mean, and I got another one when I got home." I said, "It wasn't beatings, it was discipline." I never went away there with a whelp or hit in the back. Only time he hit me in the back was I jumped and tried to run away. And when I did, it petrified him because he knew, okay, I got to be more, normally it was one. If I really did something bad, two. But I have had multiple paddles in the same day, where I didn't learn my lesson the first time. And if you ever got one at school, that was
Oh yeah,
automatic at home back
yeah.
then. You were down for two. And my dad delivered the mail to my school, so he would get firsthand information if I did something to get in any kind of trouble.
Now, so at my school, we had corporal punishment when I was. We're about the same age, so we had corporal
Yeah.
punishment. So
Oh
we
yeah.
could. Okay, yeah. Uh, we had a
Oh,
teacher who had a fiberglass paddle. It was a shop teacher. He had a fiberglass paddle, and he drilled holes in it to
yeah.
cut
Oh
down on
yeah.
wind
You had to have the
resistance.
holes in it to get
Yeah,
the yeah.
to cut down on wind
Yeah.
resistance, and he called it the silencer.
Yeah, well, our principal, like all principals, probably back in the 1900s, had one like that, and it said the Board of Education.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I would tell you what my principal would do in high school. Good man, man, a great man. He's passed now, but he was a ex-Marine drill sergeant. So that tells you, crew cut, a big tattoo, and short sleeve with a tie every day I ever known him. Short sleeves and a tie. And first day of school, everybody's going to misbehave.
Right.
Everybody.
Yeah,
Or
you're
not
testing. You're
everybody, but a
testing
lot of
people.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the first day of school, he would wait and watch and find like one of the big offensive linemen from the football team doing something they
Right.
shouldn't, call them in. And we had our first game that week. He'd say either 3 licks or 5-day suspension. And the kid had to take the paddle because he didn't want to miss the football game.
Right.
And the principal would make that big offensive lineman or defensive tackle cry.
Mm.
And he would paddle them right before the bell at the end of the day. So when they walked out all teared up, everybody else in the school said, man, I ain't doing nothing this year. I am walking the straight and narrow. And I thought, he planned that. I didn't know him
Yeah.
back then. I was like, that joker planned that every year. He would whip somebody's tail right out of the gates that was a bully, tough, just somebody that everybody else knew. Man, if that guy cried, I don't have a chance. So, yeah, definitely corporal punishment. I don't know when that ended. I know my boys didn't have that. Um, Probably late, early 90s, I'm guessing, when all that
Right.
ended. I don't know. Would have to research that a little bit.
Now, do you borrow material from your past sermons?
Yes. When I started, I didn't keep like when I walked out of ministry. I had went through a divorce. I was married 25 plus years. Um, my ex-wife and I got to a place. She says, I don't want to live this anymore. I don't want to do this. And at the same time that was going on, my mom had been terminally ill, and my father had been taking care of her for 4 years.
Right.
So I'm like, man, she passed. I went through that divorce. I thought, I don't really want to have anything to do with ministry. I love God, but I liked about 5 people. I didn't want to be around folks. So I started a little business as a home inspector. I did that for years. But the reason I lead to that was when I walked away from ministry, all those tapes I had of sermons, because, every pastor's got an ego. He wants to tape his sermons and you give them out to people. I kept maybe 20, but I had notebooks of stories and
Right.
things about, and sermon notes. So I went through those books and pulled out stories that I used in church.
Right.
And a lot of those were great for my clean comedy. And in fact, one of my first shows, a guy came to it who I used to pastor. He's like, man, I've heard a lot of these, but it's different hearing them
Yeah.
here than it was in a sermon context, like getting spankings or, about that Siskel and Ebert. All of those were things I told in church,
Right.
but I tied an hour's worth into a comedy show. So, yeah, I definitely pulled, and I think that's why I'm getting to do what I'm doing now. GD is I had that 25 years in the pulpit,
Right.
and I did one take television where I couldn't afford production. It was
Right.
like, if you screw this up, you need to fix it because we're live. And
Right.
I screwed up many times, quoting the wrong scripture or saying the wrong day of the week, and I'd have to correct it on the fly.
Yeah.
But it prepared me. I didn't know this is what I was going to do, but it prepares me for what I do every day now. So that's pretty cool.
Now, that's part of the reason why I wanted to talk with you because, my general rule of thumb is I don't like to talk to comedians who've been performing less than 3 years, because in
Sure.
my mind it takes at least 3 years to find your voice,
Yeah.
and there's no point in talking to someone who hasn't found their own voice yet.
Yeah. Exactly.
And since you were a minister for years, I knew that you were bringing that to the table. So it's kind of like having an advanced course on oratory,
Yeah.
before you do the stand-up comedy. Hi, I'm GD Fenderson, certified forensic humorist and host of Done Way Past Funny. You have just watched part 1 of our interview with comedian Big Rich Brock. Please join us as we continue our interview, and when you come back to join us, bring a friend.